Welcome to Meeple Arts, a discussion of visual design for board games. I am Greg Grimsby, and let's get started with episode 2. Greetings and welcome to Meeple Arts. Today I am super excited to have a special guest with us. This is John de Campos. John, welcome. How about you introduce yourself and tell us about your journey as an artist?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me, Greg. I'm John de Campos. I am the CEO of Terrible Games. It's a LLC partnership. I have 4 of my really close friends and fellow creatives who have helped me build the. We're just starting out. We did our first release for a game called Token Terrors last summer, and we have at least a year and a half worth of stuff that we've yet to roll out. But I'm the primary illustrator behind all of the releases we do at Terrible Games. My partner Shannon Hadley does all of our layout and graphic design stuff. And then I have a co-designer named Phil and another one named Lucas. And then the guy who does all of our video and 3D rendering stuff's name is Tim Brocious. They're all superheroes and I love all of them. My background as an artist, I was actually talking to my daughter about this on our car ride to school this morning because she was talking about being an architect. And my mom says that I wouldn't stop drawing. The bottom of our kitchen table was covered in crayon drawings. I would just draw all the time. She thought that my stuff looked pretty good for my age. I kind of used it as a social icebreaker as a kid. I moved around every couple of years because it was just me and my mom. And I was also I've been fat my whole life. So it's just a really good icebreaker when trying to make new friends to be bam, check out this awesome pinup. I did a Cyclops. So I was doing that. And then I remember I was magically just taken away with the 1992 X-Men 5-fold cover that Jim Lee did.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Yes. When that comic came out, I remember I have this distinct, crystallized memory in my head of me standing almost in the middle of the street, just dumbstruck by what I was looking at. And I remember looking at the whole spread with the X-Men, all tidal waving towards Magneto and this huge panorama. And I was just what is going on? This is insane. And it was right there that I was I want to do comics when I become an adult. So
I'm getting chills, John, remembering that moment, man.
Right? Yeah.
Same moment. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just kind of was a troublemaker, and I got in a lot of trouble in school because I just would not. My head was just down, working on little pocket comics and kind of telling the teacher I wasn't very interested in what they had to say because their lessons didn't pertain to my future. And I just continued like that until I got about a year and a half through community college, and then I dropped out of there. I was going after an art-ish degree. I think I was going to try and use it as a ramp to going to maybe MICA, which the Maryland Institute College of Art right here in Baltimore. I'm a Marylander. I live in Baltimore now, but I think that was kind of the plan. And about after a year and a half or just under 2 years, as I was about to go into my sophomore semester, I was just I don't want to do this anymore. I hate this, man. So I just kind of 9-to-5'd it and kept on doing smaller art projects. I started getting into doing art on a regular basis once I co-founded this organization called the Baltimore Rock Opera Society that's celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year. It's an all volunteer fueled theatrical music and arts community theater entity here in Baltimore. It's a tent pole of one of the artistic community here in Baltimore now after 10 years. But the Bros creates all original rock operas, and I've composed music for a number of those rock operas and built props. But one of the things I've done consistently throughout its entire 10-year lifespan is do t-shirt and poster designs for the shows, stickers and pins and stuff like that. And while I was sort of dabbling in doing that and also doing posters and t-shirt and merch design for my own bands, I was in a video game cover band called Entertainment System and another one called Rare Candy. I have a stoner metal band now called haze mage, and a party rock band called Cowabunga Pizza Time. So I've been doing art like on for my other interests non-professionally for this entire time up until me and my partner Bits found out that we were going to have our daughter. And I was working at like a brewery for like 10.50 an hour, and we were doing the math like if I keep working at this place and it costs us $1,000 a month to hire somebody to watch the kid for us at a daycare with other children running around, like we don't really know, does it make sense for me to keep working there, to just work 40 hours a week to pay someone else to raise my kid for me?
Yeah.
So
it's so expensive in that area.
Yeah. So my partner was making enough to basically cover us if I went freelance and became a stay-at-home dad. And approximately a little over 6 years ago, I started to move into that formally. And here I am now. Yeah, I still do
Awesome.
freelance stuff for like bands. Like I do, you'll see when we look at the work, there's an album cover, and I did a t-shirt for Quackalope recently. But since starting Terrible Games, my mind, and especially after with the COVID shutdowns, like my band practices are over. I'm not gigging. I'm not going out and seeing my buddies. Game nights are like pretty hard to negotiate because people are worried about contamination. So I've kind of just been locked in this goblin cave you see behind me. Like just trying to build up the Terrible Games brand and work with other creators, and also still like, nurture my freelance career. But since getting into the game space as an indie pop, sort of demonstrated my value in that sector as a visual artist. So I've started to pick up more work as a freelancer doing artwork for other people's games, which has been really cool and very rewarding. So that's where I'm at. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That's awesome. Now, I want to loop back to a couple comments that I think are shared threads. When I went to school, this was a while ago, a couple of decades ago, I went to get my degree in painting and drawing. They didn't teach you how to paint or draw, right?
Yeah.
So this is like 30 years ago. Everything was like abstract expressionism, which definitely has its place. But if you wanted to go to learn how to do comic books, forget it, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, when you mentioned Jim Lee, he was an inspiration for me, and he made me want to be a comic book artist also. And I went to school thinking I was gonna learn how to be a better illustrator, but it didn't happen. That wasn't in the curriculum. I went out, I got my degree, and it has helped and served me. But I feel you. I think the state of art instruction has proliferated and diversified so that there are more opportunities for young artists to learn the very specific kind of art that they want to learn, and that's awesome. But it wasn't that way back when I was in school, so I see that journey, John, and it was a struggle back then.
Yeah, man. I mean, for me, it was really that they needed me to pass an entry-level English course where the teacher and I just hated each other. And also I needed to do a Algebra 1 math credit prerequisite in order to even have credits that were transferable in order for me to seek education at an art school. And after failing my math class for 2 semesters in a row and having like an actual shouting match with my English teacher after she gave me a D- on a paper that I'm like killed myself over to try and get a better grade, I was just like, I'm out. Like I can't hang. I'm not here to learn I'm not here to be a mathematical engineer. I'm not here to learn how to become a novelist. I want to draw comics and create characters and do things as a visual artist. And I just wasn't able to accomplish that there. So I dipped out.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. Let's go take a look at your awesome work. So I'm going to swap over to the concept board. And here we have just an amazing array of thumbnails of some of your work. So this is your conversation, John. So we'll start off with whatever piece that you feel kind of begins this exploration of your work.
Oh, sure. Okay. Why don't we swing over to that lineup of creatures on the left? We'll start at the beginning. Sort of the beginning. This is really recent work. I did this, I think, last week. So what we're looking at here is for anybody who ever plays any RPGs, You'll
Hmm.
usually find inside of the player's handbook, as it called for Dungeons and Dragons, called the player's handbook. There's usually an entire entry, a series of different parts of an entire chapter where they just discuss the races that players can be inside the world of the role playing game. This is a murderer's row of the of the races you can select in an RPG I just co-created with Tony Vicinda called Repugnant that we did for Zine Quest 3 on Kickstarter. That campaign actually just wrapped earlier this week or last week, early this week. We did like 4,500. And yeah,
Congrats.
thank you. Thanks. Zines are much smaller projects. They're a lot the barrier for entry for those is very, very low. So it's a cool containable project. I have other stuff sort of in the wings like all the time. I think with all freelancers that's probably true. And so this one was containable, but it's a decent amount of work. You can see all the stuff we got going on here.
Yeah, awesome. I'm super curious about how you produce these specific kinds of visuals, and hopefully our audience is going to be equally intrigued because when I see your work, I love that line quality. I love the thick and thin line. I love the contrast of the dark shapes versus the light shapes, and of course, then there's the character design itself, which is just super cool. So that's a lot of stuff. We could talk about character design. We could talk about the execution of the actual line
Sure.
and art
Yeah.
style itself. So, hey, whatever inspires you, go for it.
Yeah, well, so I'll just talk about the process a little bit for these guys. So you'll
Okay.
see that like there's a lot of there's some perspective happening with some of the placement of like feet. Like if you look at the Hoggo couple in the middle there, you can see that their feet are slightly offset to sort of suggest that they're taking up space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with like the body language of the Verman that's on the far left with his arms crossed. So that particular piece, for a lot of like a lot of traditional artists or people who are working in pen or paper, or maybe if it's just part of your workflow and you still do it this way, will do like the cylinder stick man sort of body building exercise when they do human forms. I've started using this thing.
There you go. Yep.
So what I do is I take this and I pose it the way I want it to be posed, and then I take a picture with it of it onto my Procreate tablet, and then I invert it and then pop it onto the canvas and drop the transparency down, and then I can just trace out the basic shape with everything being anatomically like solid. If I want somebody to look like a gnome, I make the head bigger, I shrink the torso, I shrink the arms, I make the feet big, and I shrink the legs. And all this stuff can be done using the point tool in Procreate. It's really, really easy. And for some of these, like the meat sack, which is the dude who's crouching, giving the finger to the onlooker, he's I actually went to Google and searched man crouching because these guys, these guys right here, you can't actually get them into a natural looking crouched position.
Yeah.
And some of the foreshortening and placement of feet and shape of feet that happen when you're drawing people who are crouched or sitting cross-legged, I'd rather pull from photo reference directly because the way that the body fits together, it looks a lot more natural when you take it and photo reference. In Procreate, though, you don't have to actually like look at a photo reference to your left and then draw it on your right. You can drop it onto the canvas and make it semi-transparent and then figure out your skeleton over top of it and then draw the character using that basic like blueprint of what the body shape is. So that's what I've been doing in Procreate, and I'm telling you, it's a time saver. It's a huge time saver.
And that's so important, right? Because most illustrators are going to tell you that they're going to take any kind of time saver that they can get, so they can put their touch and their best details on the things that matter, and not have to get bogged down in some of that perspective or posing and all that. So I appreciate how this probably is allows you to produce more work, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean the workflow using Procreate in general. So the first 5 years of me doing freelance, I did everything traditionally. I would do a photo blue underlayer of pencils, then I would do a detailed overlayer of graphite, then I would clean that up with an eraser, then I would get out my brush pens and start going to town. Hope I don't get any smears. Then I would take that and take a picture with my phone, email it to myself, drop it into GIMP, clean up the line art, then start doing digital coloring. It's very laborious. And it made turnaround time for freelance projects tripled at least. With Procreate, like if people are just like, oh man, I don't really have $1,100 for an iPad. Procreate's only $20, so 1,120 if you have steady work as a freelancer, the thing will pay for itself in 2 or 3 months, like easy.
Awesome. Now you are getting some nice thick and thin line on parts of this. I'm assuming that's all kind of built into the kind of pressure sensitive brushstrokes that you've chosen in Procreate.
Yeah, so you buy the Apple Pencil to interface with Procreate, which has a very responsive pressure sensitivity nib on the end.
Hmm.
This particular brush is actually called Rusty Nib, and it's part of a brush set that I downloaded. I can't remember the name of the site at the moment. But you'll see if you start just talking about Procreate online, these ads will magically appear in your social feed where they're trying to sell you brush packs. And this particular pen has sort of like it's a rusty nib. It's a metal nib for inking comics that has these little natural squiggle marks around the side. It has this sort of rough, organic kind of feel to it. And for this work, I just really love the way it looks. It looks like an EC comic. It looks like horror comic book stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, John, I would love to hear about the character design as it relates to the RPG.
Sure.
I'm sure that, as you mentioned, we have races in an RPG. Where did the ideas for those races come from? Were some of them inspired by your art, right? Like, I'm a big advocate of allowing art to inspire actual game design and content and mechanisms. And I sense that there's a lot of that back and forth. It depends upon the relationship of the designer to the artist and the size of the team. But let's talk about this art as an example of the artist working with the designer, inspiring one another. Yeah, go for it.
Sure. So me and Tony are friends. We've actually been buddies for I think almost 2 years now. He's another game designer, and we were just kind of kicking ideas around and having just casual chats behind the scenes. And we become friends because he hired me for a couple of jobs for his company, Plus One EXP, which does like beard balm and hair care and skincare products, but with a tabletop RPG sort of aesthetic bent. He had me do some rebranding for him, and the whole process is really cool. And we still talk and like give each other advice. When Zine Quest came around, since he had done a Zine Quest last year, I had just come off of doing like a 10-day like sprint of art for this other game I'm working on called Black Mold, and the contained size of that project and how I was able to just like laser focus into it for 10 days straight and get it done. I really liked having an idea and seeing it to fruition in a short period of time. So I thought that doing Zine Quest would just be another slam dunk. And I was like, hey, Tony, what's up? I'll do all the art if you write all the words. So what do you think? And he was like, yes, I'm into that. So the general concept for Repugnant came off of Tony and I doing an actual play for an RPG called Lords of the Toxic Wasteland, where I played this like really scuzzy, like shameless, like necromancer. And I really loved the feeling I got out of playing a character that wasn't aligned to be good or evil. I was just like kind of just didn't care like what anyone thought of me in the world. So I kind of took that feeling and came up with this idea for this setting called Repugnant, where the entire plan is just garbage. And everybody like has snots like hanging out of their nose and stuff in their teeth, and they like pick their ears, eat their boogers, fart in public, burp. Like they don't care. It's a world where culture centers around a really lax approach to being totally gross. And Tony ran with it, and these are the races we have. So on the far left, you have the vermin. They are basically rat people. They can dislocate their joints to squeeze through small areas, and their tail is prehensile. They're also good at sort of like gnawing through stuff. Next to them, we have the meat sacks, which is basically our analog for humans, which for all intents and purposes, they are humans, but they have more of a Neanderthalic look to their physique.
Yep.
Also, their culture is centered around like sticky matted hair that they like hide like touchstones of their history as a person inside the hair, and they can draw from it to like give them like power or morale, like a morale boost.
It's wild.
The in the center is my favorite. There's the hoggos. They are pig people that are like extremely industrious and loyal, and they also are like the big heavies, like the enforcers. Next to them is my second favorite race, is the junk punks. These are irradiated insectoid mites that have basically replaced the blood of a living creature to inhabit circuitry and old pieces of junk to sort of approximate a bipedal human form to coexist with the other creatures of the crust. And they are these robot beings that have modular building systems for their bodies that like are constantly improving as you find new junk. So you can see there's like two extremes there. There's like a big heavy guy whose torso is made of like an amplifier, and then a little dude whose torso is made from like a mini microwave. And then on the far right, clinging to the wall, are the roachers. Those are insect people that have two sets of arms and a hard shell with concealed wings on their back that they can use to glide and flutter from tall heights. And they can also like complete two tasks at once per session by using all of their arms. And they're also much smaller. They're like gnome sized, so they also have some good mobility stuff.
So you mentioned some typical kind of RPG terms there, like tank. I don't know if you said utility, but we have some of those kind of or support roles. So did you set out with your designer and go, okay, we're going to have like these archetypes? What is that going to visually look like? Or was it kind of like, I want to do this hog creature race and then kind of figure out where it fit, or like all the above?
Initially the idea I think for anything that I do game design wise as a designer, I usually start with a Google document and I just start word vomiting onto the page. And that's kind of what happened here. Actually, when we sort of centered in on the general direction of what Repugnant was going to be about, I just sort of jotted down some really loose ideas with like a 1-sentence descriptor, like pig people. They have a tough hide. They can chew through anything, and they're strong, right? And then Tony took that and just blew it up, put it under a microscope, and gave me a bunch of stuff to sort of fuel the character design. And the idea with the whole world is that it's a world of junk. So all their clothes are stained and ripped. Everybody's got cut off shorts or things that have frayed cloth. They all look like they're kind of like gutter bums, right? I mean, they're all kind of beat up. And so I'm just trying to dress them in clothes that are probably like artifacts from a bygone era of when there used to be like actual visible loam and earth and trees. The world that they're on now is like ours, but it's buried under 3 to 4 miles of garbage. So everything they have is taken from the filth. It's all garbage.
Awesome. Now you have a lot of other really cool pieces in here. If you have some other things you want to kind of mention about Repugnant or this piece, we can linger, or if you want to kind of continue on to other pieces, it's your call.
Yeah, we'll keep trucking. We can look at some more stuff. I wanted to show you guys a little bit of variance of style, because that one has sort of like I said, a horror comic aesthetic, and then if you move to the one to the right, you'll see something that's a little cleaner looking. So this right here is an elven miner who is freeing orb crystals from a subterranean mine. This is just an ink. It's not ink. It's all digital, but this is a line art piece that I've done for Wes Woodbury's upcoming game. It's actually releasing on Kickstarter on March 23rd, called Questeros. It's a tarot centric trick taking game for 2 to 6 players, and then it's also got a solo adventure, and it also functions as a Fates deck for RPGs and as a tarot deck. You can see here I'm actually using one of the preloaded brushes that's already in Procreate that is called Syrup. And you do have the ability to take any one brush and like click on it and custom dial its taper rate and its distress and how much ink drops and its pressure sensitivity. You can do a whole host of different customizations. And this one I have set for a really sharp taper, for just a little bit of a cleaner, more, I don't know, maybe cartoony kind of look.
Mm-hmm. John, do you find that you're able to get good actual like line movement in Procreate, as opposed to like, didn't get the curve I want, didn't get the curve I want, and you're kind of like having to restate until you get that line feel the way you want? Like Photoshop can tend to be like that. In Procreate, do you feel that you kind of get your intention with the line work quicker, or maybe some settings that you have set that allow that to happen?
I mean, you can't see it from the camera, but I have a standing desk with an angle top that meets me at like 60 degrees. So I don't know, my wrist control and the way that this is for my back, because I spent the first 4 years hunched over a desk and I went to the doctor. Like I have all these back
Mm,
problems from being at a desk for too long drawing. So I got the standing desk. So I think it's a wrist control thing, but also you have guided paths that'll happen automatically if you just keep the pen down at the end of your stroke. So if I need a perfectly straight line, I can draw a line sloppy as hell and then just keep my pen on the canvas and the line will just snap straight.
cool.
And it's the same thing for curves and the same thing for squares and triangles and circles. If you do a circle and it's kind of wonky, if you just keep the thing on there, it'll immediately just perfect itself. So I don't know, man. I think Procreate's rad. Like it's really good.
Awesome. I'll try not to make this sound like a commercial for Procreate, but I hope there's a lot of artists out there who are going to find some of these tools interesting and will perhaps look it up. Yeah, awesome.
The other thing I'll raise about Procreate also is you'll see in this one and in the other piece that like this is one of the most amazing things, and I didn't actually start using it effectively until a couple months ago. All the brushes you can use to ink with, you can also use to erase, and you have an autofill feature. If you drag the color from the top right corner into the field of a closed area, it'll immediately just fill black. So what you can do is you'll see on all the orbs here that there's like a pentagram. That's all eraser line there. So you're able to get good hatching and like scalloped triangular ended line strikes coming off of stuff to create white and negative space in solid black, which especially for like a rock and roll or horror comic sort of aesthetic where you want to get a lot of black onto the page, it's just so great.
Yeah, awesome. I definitely see some of that inspiration in your work, both on your wall behind you and here. Do you have some particular artists and other media that you have like been inspired by, and maybe you kind of turn to when you're feeling a little bit dry, if that never happens for you?
Looking at other, I really love Skinner. I don't know if you've ever seen Skinner or Sean Airberg, who does Pork Magazine. Those guys are both like metal rock and roll artists who do really great work that I like. There's Alden Cloudput, who also used to go by Skelligul, who does some really interesting stuff. I mean, if you're on Instagram and you're self-promoting as a freelancer or creator, as you go through your feed and just do maintenance on leaving a couple comments and likes and stuff and just looking around, you're going to end up finding a bunch of artists that you really like. I'm doing art direction on a game called Battle Grid Champions, and I can't handle all the work for it. So I've contracted this guy named Sam McKenzie from Australia, who does really, really cool stylized stuff that I love. So there isn't really anybody in particular. I would probably reach towards comic book artists because I've been idolizing them for so much longer. Jack Kirby and Joe Quesada, Frank Miller.
Oh yeah.
Joe Madureira. There's all these guys that I've just been looking at their stuff for so much of my life that like I think they're sort of baked in a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But for more artists that are sort of like in the same world that I'm in, who are actively creating for like a smaller audience, those other guys and a lot of great Instagram artists that I don't have time to list.
Awesome. Well, we have this other piece right here. I don't know if this relates to the previous one, this Meteor King.
That is an album cover for a local Baltimore metal band.
Awesome.
So it's they do like traditional probably like 90s UK style like heavy metal. And the name of their album, I guess their single was about a vampire, so they did an album called Deep Crimson, and they told me they wanted a Dracula, like a traditional Dracula style vampire feeding off of a woman in a cemetery. There you go.
There you go. I mean, there's your brief.
Yeah. They didn't have anything else. Yeah, it was all written description. And for process purposes, for doing smaller projects like this, or really anything, actually, what I usually do is I still do like a photo blue color for the rough sketch using Procreate. I send that to them first and ask them for notes. If they have anything that they want changed or they don't like something, then cool. There's still plenty of room before I lay down like lines. Then I move to line art. Then I usually do line art and colors in the same breath and send them the finished piece. And provided they don't want any of the colors changed, like we're good to go.
Awesome. Now, I do want to talk about, maybe this is a good time to do it, to talk about, you've done some freelance work and you mentioned that you're art directing on this project. I'm really interested in that relationship between the art director and the artist as a two-way relationship. I would love to hear what your feelings of that relationship are. Like what makes a great art director, whether it's something that's communicated to you as the artist. Yeah, just your feelings on that.
Sure. So, yeah, Battlegrid Champions is a game created by this dude named Ron Almeida. It's up and coming. It initially started as a tabletop card game, and he's a programmer who has some pretty extensive experience in doing stuff in the digital space. So he decided to pivot it to an online game. And yeah, there's like 60 champions that you're supposed to be able to choose from. I just can't. He had initially brought me on as art direction and also to do illustration on a paid contract basis. So with the art direction stuff, what I'm basically did is I set up a 4-page brief. Each document is separately laid out inside of a Google Drive folder. The first document talks about the prompts for the character work. The second one basically lays out what the terms of ownership and IP stuff is and how much these guys are going to be paid per project. It says that they get 50% up front. It also sets expectation for how I'd like the drafting and proofing process to happen, which basically mirrors what I just described. I told them to send me rough sketches first. I'll give notes. After that, they'll move to lines and colors. And if there's any changes after that, I'll let them know. I try to keep anything to basically like a 2 or 3 wave thing where, and anytime you're giving notes or asking for notes or anything, you just want to be as concise but clear as you possibly can, and don't ever worry about like belaboring something, but try to pick your battles, because nitpicky stuff needs to just not be mentioned. If you feel like you can live with it, probably just don't talk about it. It doesn't it doesn't need to be a thing that they have to change, because the less changes and the smoother turnover is, the more like trust and I think momentum you can get out of people that you contract for art. And it also expresses like what we want the final output to represent. So I need a 360 design sketch that's of like sketch quality that shows all sides of the character. And then I need like one pinup finished color piece that is the character like doing something, right?
Definitely. Awesome. Now, when you're getting feedback or giving feedback, do you find that typically is in text form, or have you done or received like paint overs or additional photo reference or maybe additions to a mood board? Like what does that specific communication look like, and do you feel that's been effective?
Yeah, so for Battlegrid Champions, I was doing just written prompts because we didn't really have any like starting point to provide to them. Because all the stuff is new. Like they're building the character from the ground up, right? The stuff that so Wes has been more or less functioning as an art director to me, and I've also done art direction in my own company for the model renders of our Token Terrors miniatures. So yeah, I have done drawn overs for our sculptor Tim, where I take a picture, like I just take a bunch of screenshots. Sorry, 1 second, my cat is like annoying the hell out of me, dude. You are on thin ice, man. Hey, sorry about that.
That's fine.
Lordy. So yeah, I've done like draw over stuff in notes where like I actually have annotated little like chunks of text that tell Tim what kind of changes I want him to make. And then what Wes was doing that was really good is he was sending me rough sketches that he was doing himself that basically gave me a layout of composition and position of the things he wanted in the piece. And I would use that as like a roadmap for the final piece and also embellish it according to my taste and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of different ways to approach art direction. And, obviously what you were mentioning earlier, where a more traditional approach is like, not only do you have a written prompt that sort of gives you an overview of the project, maybe it has some world setting stuff or like a character background, but it'll also come, with a companion, like basically a vision board of here's a bunch of environments, here's a bunch of creatures and characters, and we're trying to sort of amalgamate this mood and this tone and come up with something that has an original feel or that is uniquely ours, but borrowing from elements of this visual package.
Yeah, that's a rough spot at the beginning of a project where there's a lot of ideas, and they're kind of in here, and some of them are very not formed yet. But you still need to communicate. So like you don't have official visuals yet, and at some point you need to create some original like key art that defines like what this project is going to look like. And so there's that middle, that kind of early period where you don't have those visuals established, and so you're having to use other language and other pictures and other things to kind of communicate that stuff until you get your own actual art that represents your style.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to make sure we get a chance to at least look through the rest of your cool stuff here. So I'm going to head back to the board, and just to be aware of your time and the importance of your time, we'll focus in on the pieces that you are maybe are different in terms of process or their kind of goals in the remaining work here.
Sure.
Where would you like to go? Yeah.
Actually, that one right there in the center with the black card in the middle, those three pieces are all doing three distinctly different things.
Sounds like a good place to look.
Awesome. So the one on the left is actually a 1x1 inch chipboard token for a solo adventure game that we developed for Token Terriers. So with Token Terriers, we have a core game that runs for $45, but then you can also buy a $10 six-pack of just the miniatures, so you can use them in RPGs or Magic the Gathering. And inside of those six packs is going to be a small little tuck box, a 3.5 by 3.5 inch tuck box that contains the components you need to do a solo game adventure that'll run about 15 to 20 minutes. And it's themed around the faction that you buy. So this one is called the Gauntlet, where three soldiers are going to be going up a 2-card span of aisles, and an endless wave of these things we're calling gobbets are going to come towards them. And they have a speed stat, which is on the left, a damage stat, which is in the center, and a health stat, which is on the far right. So these are just attack robots that have a burlap sack with a goblin's face painted on it that just wave after wave come after this row of three soldiers trying to make their way vertically up to the end of the other side of the card. I had to produce 10 of those, and I just did 3 different pieces of artwork for 3 basic collections of stats. So I basically categorized stats based on like the attack power. There was a series of 3s, a series of 2s, a series of 1s, and I assigned one of the 3 images to those tiles, and they were really fun to make. And but you can see here that like the level of detail is a little bit lower because I understand that this thing is going to get scaled to an inch.
Yeah, I'm zooming way farther in than you intend for this to ever be seen. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of cool detail there.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm trying to get like big swaths of black and a very like striking sort of line art presentation with that.
Yeah, John, I love in your work how you have this great sense of contrast and shapes and just wonderful like black silhouettes of those maces in the background, and then the stark kind of two-tone shadowing. It's just there's a lot of really lovely shape and line quality to these. So
Thank
super
you.
cool.
Thanks so much. And also something that's worth noting, in Procreate, there is a symmetry canvas tool that you can drop on top of your canvas that will make it so that each side of the thing will be identical. What you're looking at there is the utilization of that tool, with the exception of the wood grain lines in the center and the face. Everything else was done with a fit. So I just cut my work in half with that piece. I just had to draw one half of it and the other half auto-generated. It's great.
Yeah, and you also like skip that obnoxious like trying to make something symmetrical by hand and it never looks quite right. It's off, slightly off kilter and off skew. Yeah, forget that. Yes, that's a great tool to avoid all that issue.
Yep. And then to the right of that, we have the last character we added to our roster of what has become 6 playable prisoner characters in a game we're working on called Black Mold. So the function of this card, this is a jumbo size card, which is 3x5 or 3x6.
Nice.
And the way that this game works is your turn only lasts as long as you can hold your breath, because you're trying to escape a subterranean compound that is completely the hallways are just blackened and shadowy from a black spore cloud of poisonous, hallucinatory, fungal mold that is affecting your psyche and making it so that your breathing is becoming more difficult. As you take damage moving through the corridors, you're going to take a spore token and put it on top of one of those spaces in sequential order. That's called your vitality track. And as you cover those symbols, different attributes that your character has start to deteriorate. So I had to set up a template with the track of 16 spaces for every character. And then some of them have white spaces that go over the top of the artwork that they serve a different mechanical function. But with this one, I went to Google and was like, scary old lady. And I found this scary old lady standing in a hallway with this weird nightgown on, and I dropped her in, and then I traced her body shape and sort of the lay of the cloth, and then I sort of formulated a face off of that and made the hair look all frayed and crazy, and like tried to make her arms look a little skinnier.
That's awesome. Hashtag photo ref.
Yeah. So yeah, and this game is like, I'm super duper excited about it. We have to delay its release for a little while, but one thing that we're doing with it is, I don't know if you've ever seen a game called oh my god, Kingdom Death Monster or Cave Evil. Mm-hmm. They have this monochromatic death metal sort of look where everything is in grayscale. And not only because it brings down costs, it also is really fun to design in a space where you're not really worried about color, because you try to do a lot more with that tonal gray and black sort of spectrum. So yeah, that's what we got going on here.
Yeah, I love the look of this, and like you mentioned, because it's just dealing with black and white and gradations therein, it has this starkness, and you're able to get really clean with it when you want to be clean, but you can still work in some texture when you just want to like establish like some feels, like background, foreground stuff, or just kind of get some grit in there and have this scary lady look like she's got some patina on her. So I love how you're allowing that choice about black and white, help reinforce the mood and give it a starkness. Just a lot of really good things going on with your art style here.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Yeah, the game is like, it's sort of survival horror, because the other prisoners who are now considered dead reanimate as like fungal thralls that are consumed by black mushrooms growing all over their body, that are like coughing and drooling, and they're like trying to get you and turn you into a fungus.
Yeah.
So these cards, actually, when you flip them over, there's an alternate version of the player character as a fungal thrall, and your win condition changes from escape to kill every other player.
So good.
Thanks, man. But Silver is the one exception. She's actually the only player character that when you flip her over, it's just her completely scratched out with pen, because she's too old to turn into a thrall. Her body can't take it, so she just dies. And
I love that asymmetry. It's great.
Well, it creates a really cool like negotiation tactic for the player who's playing a Silver, because the other players know that if she gets damaged enough, she's not going to turn into a thrall. She can only be an asset to the group, because she's never going to turn around and try to kill them. So it creates some cool moments.
Yeah. So there's two more things I want to say about this piece. You could have easily have gone with a more traditional like fantasy RPG rendering. Like, we can see how Fantasy Flight might tackle this. No, I love Fantasy Flight. They do amazing stuff. But you had a more specific kind of look, and it's differentiated you from, what could have been this over illustrated kind of depiction. So I love how, again, that art style has separated you out from a kind of a busy area of competition. But it also, this makes me think about old RPGs, like the original Dungeons and Dragons player manual, right? Like, for a lot of players, we know that stuff.
Yeah.
And it has like a nostalgia factor to take a look at those like ink drawing style of monsters. And so you're kind of getting like a double win here. You're like, this is your mood for your game, but you're also are harkening back to that early RPG kind of vibe. And, I dig it.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Yeah. I could talk all day, but again, I want to honor your time, so I'm going to let you figure out where you want to go from here, and we'll
sure
wrap up.
Sounds good. So just to give you like a different side of the spectrum outside of the game design world, you'll see that yellow and black image there in the middle. This is still part of the board gaming world. So the media creator Quackalope, Jesse Anderson, is a buddy of mine, and he was alone on Thanksgiving this year with COVID and everything. A lot of people were, and he wanted to do. In 48 hours, he slapped together an online convention for his community, and he wanted to do a T-shirt for them. And he reached out to me, And this is the kind of stuff like a one color on one color, thinking about producing for apparel for like a screen printing process.
Mm-hmm.
What works about this piece is that you can take this entire layer and drop it into a flat black where every single visible pixel is black, and that can create a one color on one color screen print for a screen printer to be able to put it onto a garment. And that's sort of the design here. And you can see I'm using this this brush that's like, I think it's called like Touch Up or something like that, where it's these small little, those small little like grade speckles that are creating a little bit of shading without actually having to resort to using a second color or doing anything with a second layer.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just do, you can, with Procreate, instead of like, you know how if you were using like Illustrator or Photoshop, you'd have to actually like point and click the path that you want. If you wanted to lock an area on the piece, you have to point and click a path. With Procreate, you can just draw that line right on there. So it's really easy to just pick and choose parts of the piece that you want to isolate in order to do different gradations of erasing. Again, that's an erase brush that is taking stuff away from the layer that I'm working on.
That's very cool. And I love how you're referencing like a digital board game platform there, like Tabletop Simulator or something of that ilk.
I actually, again, with the photo referencing, man, it just makes things a million times easier. I went online and looked up Root on Tabletop Simulator. And I found the physical photo of somebody of just Root on TTS. I dropped it right in, transparency it, and then just did my line work over top.
Now, I don't want to not talk about this piece because I think this is important to talk about. As we as a community and as a society deal with important issues of representation and voice, and I saw some dialogue in Facebook about this subject of representation, and so I feel that we definitely should hear some words from you about what you were trying to accomplish with this particular character archetype. So go for it.
So this is a piece that was done for Wes Woodbury's game Questeros. Again, this is the second one from this one. And this is the Queen of Staves. So in Tarot, much like a common playing card deck, there are different suits. There is the Pentacle, the Cup, the Wand, and the Sword, or the Wand is called Staves. He's calling it Staves in this one. So I wanted to do some stuff that was non-binary. Yeah. I thought that the king and queen, the king of Staves is has hints of being feminine leaning, but her legs are unshaven. She's got armpit hair. Also, she's categorized as the king as far as like the hierarchy of what placement she is in the different suits. And with the queen, I wanted to do a character whose gender was kind of hard to discern. I thought that you could infer that maybe this person is a male, but they're called the queen, and they sort of have breasts and sort of feminine eyelashes, but also a mustache and hairy feet. Like, I just think that sort of thinking outside of the box and creating a space in a game where this kind of inclusion is in there to just present the idea to maybe a less I don't want to say the wrong thing here. A player who this idea might challenge their sensibilities about society. Right. I think exposing this idea, this concept to those people is really important. There's also some imagery in the tarot that sort of led me to this conclusion for this character, and that behind them on the traditional tarot card is a male and female lion. And I liked that there's a duality there, that this is a character who exists in between those two binary genders. So yeah, I mean, it's all about the inclusion stuff. And we tried to do a good amount of that within Questeros. Of course, I'm running all this stuff by Wes as we're moving along. And with the Staves in general, I sort of, the entire house of Staves, the Knight, I forget what all of them are called, but I try to do some stuff like the Knight of Staves is like an overweight woman. I just, I want there to be body diversity. I want there to be gender diversity. I want there to be racial diversity wherever we can do it. And if anybody backs Questeros, or you look at the artwork I've done for there, you'll see a lot of that in there.
Awesome. I think that's a really great place to kind of wrap up this conversation as we as we as a society really just get started with addressing this idea of diversity and representation. So glad we could wrap up on this piece. So John, for those who are interested in finding out more about you, getting in contact with you and seeing your work, how can we do that out there on the internets?
So my like outside of the game world, but I do talk about game stuff. My Instagram account is ghost_bat_. A lot of my like purely artist driven stuff will be seen on there. At Terrible Games or at Token Terrors also for the game centric stuff on Instagram. You can go to www.terriblegames.info, which will just take you to the Token Terrors page, which is tokenterrors.com. And that's it. I'm on Facebook a lot, like probably way too much, and I'm trying to not be that way. But if there's people out there who are getting into the game world or the illustration freelance world, you can DM me. I'll if you seem cool. I usually screen people that friend me now that I don't know on Facebook. But if you seem cool, then I'll happily talk to you and give you advice and stuff.
Awesome. John, it's been great to talk with you and take a look at your work and hear about your story and share some practical tips and see the cool work that you've been doing. Thank you for spending your time with us and sharing today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And for my watchers, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Meeple Arts.
Bye. See ya.
Thanks to John for being our guest. If you have any feedback or questions, please email me at greg@meeplearts.com and visit the website meeplearts.com. Thanks for watching.